So, down in southern India, there's this sacred hill, and on top of it, a single flame has ignited, well, a legal firestorm. This is the story of Thirupparankundram Hill, where the simple act of lighting a festival lamp turned into an incredible fight over history and heritage. A fight that stretches all the way back to the British Empire.
I know, it sounds kind of crazy, right? How in the world can one little lamp cause a legal battle that spans 100 years? But that's the mystery we're going to solve today. We're diving into a story that's got ancient texts, old colonial courtrooms, and a single geographical detail that, believe me, changes absolutely everything. So let's get right into it. Okay, so here's the entire conflict in a nutshell. On one side, you have a devotee saying, hey, let's just restore this sacred tradition, let's light the lamp on this ancient stone pillar. And on the other side, you've got officials from the temple and the state basically putting up a wall and saying, nope, we're going to keep doing what we're doing to maintain the peace. A simple request met with a very firm no. So let's set the scene. The person who filed the petition, a devotee of Lord Muruga, isn't asking for anything new. He just wants to bring back an old tradition at the Arulmigu Subramania Swami temple. Now, here's the twist. This same hill is also home to the Sikandar Badu Sahad Dargha, which is a Muslim shrine. And while the two have coexisted for years, this one request, man, it just brought all these old tensions right back to the surface. And how do we know all this? The reason we can talk about this with so much detail is because this whole story is laid out, meticulously, in a judgment from the Madras High Court. Every single argument, every piece of historical evidence we're about to look at, it comes directly from this really fascinating legal document. All right, so let's flip the coin and look at the other side. The state, the temple officials, the Dargha management, they all came out swinging against this petition. Their arguments weren't just about custom. This was a full-on coordinated legal challenge to stop that lamp from being lit. So their case was kind of multi-layered, right? First, they're like, look, this lamp hasn't been lit up there for a century. It's not a thing anymore. Then they pull out this legal ace, something called res judicata, basically saying, hey, the court's already decided this. Case closed. They even challenged whether the devotee had the right to sue at all, claimed it would stir up communal trouble, and even argued it violated a major law that protects religious sites. Okay, that fancy Latin term, res judicata. What does it actually mean? Well, think of it like this. It's the legal system's way of saying you can't have a do-over. It prevents the same argument between the same people from being dragged into court again and again. The officials were totally convinced that a court case from 2014 had already put this whole thing to bed. But, and this is a big but, they missed something really important. And to figure out what they missed, we have to become legal detectives and travel back in time. The judge in our modern case realized the answer wasn't recent at all. No, it was buried deep inside a lawsuit from the 1920s, when India was still under British rule. And that single case, it turns out, is the key that unlocks this entire mystery. And we're not talking about some small-town disagreement here. This was a huge battle over who actually owned Thirupparankundram Hill. It was so important that it went all the way up the chain to the Privy Council in London. That was the final highest court for the entire British Empire back then. Whatever they decided, that was it, the final word. So check out this legal roller coaster. In 1923, a local court says, yep, the temple owns the hill. Simple enough. But then, just 3 years later, in 1926, the Madras High Court flips it completely, saying, nope, it belongs to the government. But wait, the story doesn't end there. In a final, absolutely massive twist, the Privy Council in London steps in, overturns the High Court, and says the original decision was right all along. Boom. The temple's ownership was now, legally speaking, set in stone. And listen to the exact words they used, because this is so important. The Privy Council found that the unoccupied portion of the hill had been in the possession of the temple from time immemorial. This wasn't just a claim anymore. It was now a hard legal fact stamped and approved by the highest court in the empire. Okay, so this is where the story gets really interesting. This is the big reveal. A tiny, almost insignificant geographical detail, just mentioned in passing in that old 1923 judgment, suddenly becomes the clue that cracks the whole case wide open 100 years later. This is the aha moment. So, hidden away in those dusty old court records was this simple observation. The hill isn't just one big lump. It actually has two distinct peaks. The Dargha, the mosque, is on the higher peak. But the Hindu temple? It's at the base of the lower peak. You see that? Two different faiths on two different peaks. So, the million-dollar question, where's the stone lamp pillar, the Deepathoon, that this whole fight is about? It's on the lower of the two peaks. Crucially, it's not on the same peak as the Dargha.
And that is the knockout punch. Since the lamp pillar is on the lower peak and not on the land that was specifically for the Dargha, it means it falls right into that unoccupied portion of the hill that the Privy Council already said belongs to the temple. Game, set, match.
And this is precisely why that whole res judicata argument just falls apart. See, the failed petition back in 2014 was super vague. It just asked to light a lamp at the hilltop, which everyone assumed meant the higher peak, where the Dargha is. So of course it was rejected. But this new petition, it was smart. It was specific. It named the Deepathoon, a precise location on the lower peak, which is legally temple property. They weren't asking for the same thing at all.
So, with all this incredible historical and geographical proof laid out, the judge was ready to make a call. And his logic completely reframed the whole debate. He basically said, everyone's been arguing about the last 100 years of custom. You're asking the wrong question. And here's this incredible line right from the judgment. The question is not one of custom. The question is one of right. Wow. The judge just cut right through all the arguments. He's saying, look, it doesn't matter if this was a continuous tradition or not. What matters is whether the temple has a legal right to do something on its own land, and maybe even a duty to protect that right.
So based on that, the final order came down and it was crystal clear. First, the court establishes that the temple has a legal duty to protect its own property. Second, lighting this lamp is a perfect way to assert that right. So, number 3, the Karthigai Deepam will be lit there every single year, starting now. And finally, to make sure it all goes smoothly, the local police have to provide protection. No ambiguity there.
Okay, so a lamp is lit on a hill. Big deal, right? Well, actually, yeah, it is a big deal, because the thinking behind this verdict has some really broad implications for how we all think about heritage, faith, and responsibility.
Think about it. This whole thing kicked off because of one devotee. The court backed up this really important idea that any single devotee, as a person having interest, has the right to go to court and fight for a temple's interests. This is especially true if the people in charge, the official management, aren't doing their job. In a way, the devotees had to save the temple from itself.
So what are the big lessons we can pull from this? First, it proves that sometimes it's the ordinary people who are the real guardians of heritage. It also teaches us a huge legal lesson. If you have a right and you don't use it, you seriously risk losing it. It's an amazing example of how the answers to today's fights can be hiding in yesterday's paperwork. And finally, it's a great blueprint for how the law can find a way to balance the rights of different communities, even when they share a sacred space. So this whole case really leaves us with one big, challenging question. The official temple management was ready to just let a right confirmed by the highest court in the British Empire, just fade away. It took one person to stand up and say no. And it makes you wonder, in our own lives, when the institutions that are supposed to protect our history and culture just stay silent, who's going to be the one to speak up for heritage?